sit through childhood without trauma. Yes, I am positing that we absolutely all have trauma. Every single one of us. And I understand that's very, very difficult, especially for some parents to hear, especially if you've also endured trauma and you are raising young children. It's very difficult to hear that statement. Because as someone who, you guys know some of my story, if you've followed me, the idea that I have gone through a lot of things myself, and then me raising my children, realizing I'm not sure there's a way to have a childhood where they don't walk out having some pain around my parenting. And that doesn't mean like we're hurting our children or we're demoralizing or debasing them or any of that. It means that the way children's brains are very, very, very different than fully operational adult brains. And because children's brains are rapidly developing, here's the key point. They don't get the context that us as adults get when we are looking back at our life. So, stay with me. What I'm getting to is this idea of, let's give you an example, all right? This idea of little Susie is playing with her mom on the floor, all right? And she's playing, let's say, I don't know, blocks. And she's about 5 or 6 years old. And her mom's sitting there and she's being super intuitive to her daughter and she's asking her questions and they're laughing together and they're having a lot of bonding moments. And it's a really beautiful parenting moment, right? And Susie and her mother are sitting there for a few hours and, you know, it's getting close to dinner time. So her mother gets up and says, you know, Susie, I need you to keep playing, but we're getting close to dinner, so I'm going to have to get up, stop playing with you, and I have to go cook dinner. So in true 5-year-old, 6-year-old form, Susie starts getting upset. You know, and the mom does as much as she can to emotionally regulate her and says, you know, I can understand why you're upset, or this is super frustrating. I can see how you would want to keep playing, and I need to make us food so you can have food in your body so you can get strong, right? So here's where we take our adult brains and we assume that these children can put that idea into full context. So we are taking like our adult brain and we are saying, they have the full context, but they don't. And what do I mean by full context? I mean, as an adult, we understand that if she did not stop playing with the blocks and kept playing with her daughter, they wouldn't have dinner, right? We get that. We understand that if she just blew dinner off and just kept playing with her daughter, they wouldn't eat that night, which actually isn't a great parenting move, right? You got to feed your children, you got to feed yourself, right? So the mom in this situation is doing the best thing possible for their child, which is stopping the one-on-one play and engaging in cooking dinner. The issue is the daughter, Susie, doesn't get that context. She is going from very immersive one-on-one time with her mother to her mother saying, I'm sorry, there's something more important. And Susie doesn't get that food in this case is actually more important. Talk to any child that is like playing a bunch of video games for a few hours, or even us as adults, like we get wrapped up in certain activities and then we blink and we realize we haven't eaten all day, right? And so it doesn't seem very important if we're really, really, really consumed into an activity. So it takes someone who is kind of keeping their eye out for us, a parent, to say, you know what, I think we need to pause this and I need to attend to you eating. And so I need to prep our food. So the daughter is looking at her mother, and all she's walking away with is this feeling of rejection. And I need you to hear that. Think about that, right? You're a 5-year-old. You have a 5-year-old brain. And your mom goes from spending a few hours to leaving the room to go make food, which me as a 5-year-old does not care about. I don't care about food right now. I care about spending time with my mother, and my mom's saying no. And so now I'm starting to have a breakdown, and I'm upset, and now my mom's upset, and I'm watching my mom get upset at me because I'm upset that I feel like she's leaving me or rejecting me because I want to spend time with her, right? And so this is that factor, and I'm telling you guys, this is that factor that is very, very, very tough for us to understand, because when we're little, we get how real that feels. We don't have the words for some of these psychological concepts. We don't have the structure and, all of the different ideas that come with it. But what we do have are the feelings we walk away with when something happens or does not happen, right? And one of the most pivotal moments here that I want us to talk about is how this actually relates to us looking back at some of our traumatic childhood experiences, okay? So I've actually heard a lot of people in my work talk to me about almost this like remorse or regret, probably the word's more like regret or maybe anger at their past selves. And it's interesting because, when children go through a traumatic event, let's say, a neighbor abused them or something. When you are looking back, let's say you're 24 now and you're looking back and you realize, oh my God, I could have walked out of that house. Oh my God, I could have called my mom. Oh my God, I could have just done anything. I could have screamed. I could have done anything. But I didn't do anything. And so we're looking back at that event at like our 24 or 25-year-old self. And remember, our brain doesn't like completely have full operating power until around 24, 25, right? So we're looking at it with full critical thinking skills, full operational brain work right there, okay? And we're looking back and we have all the context. We have all of the strategies now. We literally know all of these things by heart. We know how to get out of certain situations. We think that we are going to like have every problem solved if we run into a problem now. And then we look back at our past selves that endured a trauma or that, went through something really difficult. And we sometimes get angry at that child. And we say, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you just call your mom? Why didn't you run out of the house? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you tell your sister? Why didn't you tell a teacher? Like whatever it is, okay? And I'm giving a pretty extreme example, but these are small things too. Like there are smaller events that happen in our lives that we get angry about. Why didn't you tell the truth there? Or why didn't you just, why didn't you just make a different decision? And the thing is we're taking our fully formed brains. A lot of these questions are coming up around mid-20s. So we're taking that voice and we are applying it to our small little selves. And our small little selves don't have full context. Our small little selves don't have full context. They don't. If you know anything about like basic psychology, most of our prefrontal cortex forms around, preteen years. And so most of us didn't even start to critically think until our preteens. And then our teenage years kind of throw us through a loop because, we have, all of our hormones. And then once that starts settling, right, we're getting closer to 20. Now we're getting closer to 24, 25. And now we start asking these questions. And now we have all of the context. And so the problem becomes us getting angry at our small selves, saying, there is so much more you could have done. But what you're really doing is saying, if that happened to me now, there is something I could have done. Because as a 5-year-old, you don't have all those tools. You don't. All you know is what's keeping you alive. That is why so many people realize that when they are going into their trauma responses, they realize it feels like a need of survival. Right? Just survive. Just survive. Just survive. Get through this moment. Get through this minute. Just survive. Right? When you have greater context, you're like, okay, I don't need to just survive. I need to advocate for myself. Right? I need to get, this done and this done and this done and this done. Right? And it's through that lens of trauma that convinces us, no, we just need to keep surviving. Okay. So bringing it full circle, if we look at Susie wouldn't really have a traumatic experience in this moment if she had full context, right? She would be like, yeah, Mom, you gotta make dinner, whatever. That's fine. And whether or not that's actually a trauma experience for Susie, we don't know. But if she has this meltdown and then her mommy's yelling at her and then she's screaming in the corner because mommy put her in timeout or something happened from this event, things are formed from these events. You got to remember, mommy doesn't want to play with me. She only wants to play with me when she wants to play with me. But when I ask her to play with me, she won't. Those are small concepts that we will form when we don't have the whole story. So very all or nothing thinking with that child because she's thinking, I played with her for 2 hours and now she's saying all or nothing. She's saying, no, you either keep playing with me or none of that mattered. Well, that's not true. And that's what, Susie's mother's trying to say to Susie. And Susie's mother doesn't get the luxury to not make dinner for her daughter. Okay. So now Susie's mother is making dinner for her daughter and it's like she can't win. It's like she can't win, right? Because she either makes dinner for her daughter and her daughter eventually eats, or she doesn't make dinner for her daughter and they both get hungry and her daughter gets upset and whiny and cranky because she's hungry. So this is my whole concept of that idea of the way our brains are. We don't get to pick and choose what impacts us as children. We don't get to put things in full context. We don't typically get to counter the all or nothing narrative. It takes a long time to start countering that because we have to develop those critical thinking skills. Oh yeah, maybe Mom does love me even though she says, I can't stay up till midnight. But many of us, I'm pretty sure I was one of them, was convinced that my parents hated me because I didn't get to have MTV and, my 10-year-old friends did or something. I don't know why a 10-year-old would need to watch MTV, but who knows? Yeah, so when we think of those critical thinking skills coming into play, what we're really talking about is until we get greater context of life situations, we are going to walk away with some false information. We're going to walk away thinking our parents don't love us that much, even though they love us so much that they're making sure we're fed and not just playing, right? So that is very tricky, because now I'm bringing it back to the other idea where, you know, when we analyze our childhood trauma, not only do we sometimes look at it through both lenses, we look at it through the lens of our adult self, but also our child self, right? We have themes that come out of our childhood trauma, which are, you know, I was never enough for my mom. My dad was never around, right? And in some families, that whole dad was never around, unfortunately, may have nothing to do with emotional neglect and everything to do with necessity. Think about that, right? If your dad was, let's say, the only person working and your mom was trying to take care of every other thing in the house and making sure the kids, the small children, were okay, your dad didn't get the luxury to be home a lot. In your smallness, you didn't know that. You didn't know that. You just knew you were upset at dad. And then we have, you know, now we're looking from a lens of an adult. And sometimes we're really critical of ourselves. And maybe we get that now. Maybe we started working a lot and realized, oh my God, I have to like either work a lot to make sure my bills are paid and my kids are fed, or I'm home a lot, but my kids don't have enough to eat, right? And so we get the context as an adult, and then we start shaming our child, our inner child. We start shaming that child and saying, you should have been grateful. You were a little brat. Well, no, you weren't a little brat. You weren't a little brat. You just didn't have all of the information. Okay, so that's pretty much the deep dive. It's no one makes it out of childhood without trauma, and we don't get the full context. We don't get the full context. It's the complexity of context. It's extremely difficult to realize that that's very complicated, and in different ages and stages of our lives, we are getting different information and honestly processing it, like literally inputting it into our body differently. It's one of those moments where when you can get to that point of recognition, there's a lot of compassion that can be had here. And so one of the things that I definitely want to give you guys with each of these takes is just a moment of reflection. And that moment of reflection today would be compassion. Compassion. Be compassionate to that small child that wanted to play with her mommy. Be compassionate to that child that endured a terrible experience when they were little. Be compassionate that you didn't have all the answers. Be compassionate that you didn't have all the context. And with your full contextual brain as an adult, allow yourself to meet that child where they were at. And with that, I leave you today with peace and strength, and I can't wait to keep on this journey with you.
If this resonated, please like, share, and subscribe.